my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to the 1999 Project, where I'll be covering every movie, or trying to anyway, review every movie from the year 1999. This week, we're going to be covering all the movies from on or around January 12th of 1999. So with that in mind, let's get started. We got a few movies to cover this week, and with the exception of one of the movies I'll be covering in this episode, the whole myth that January is the dumping ground for movies, it's not a recent phenomenon, let's just say that. But let's kick things off with this film starring Val Kilmer and Mira Sorvino, At First Sight.
I want this to work. I want us to work.
At First Sight was directed by Irwin Winkler, primarily known as a producer for some movies you may have heard of: Rocky, Raging Bull, The Right Stuff. He had a hand in some of those little-known movies, but this is one of the very few that he directed. And it shows. This is based on the story To See and Not See by Oliver Sacks, and it tells the story of a man named Virgil, played by Val Kilmer. He is blind. He works as a masseuse at a mountain resort in upstate New York, where Mira Sorvino's character goes for a little R&R. The two meet and immediately connect. She doesn't realize he is blind at first, but as the two grow closer, she finds an experimental cataract treatment to try and cure his blindness. And Virgil goes through with it and learns that just because you can see doesn't mean that you can't see. It's a metaphor, or an attempt at one. Irwin Winkler has a very good eye for producing. Val Kilmer is a very talented actor, so there are ingredients here for something good. What we get instead is just a mess of just melodrama. This one was not super great. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't awful, it wasn't unwatchable. It just felt like you were in it, like a little too much. Best part of the movie was Val Kilmer. He gave the movie socks, or at least attempted to. I like in the movie how they show that just because he's blind doesn't mean that he is not capable. I mean, he actually has a life. He's lived in the town that he works in for pretty much his entire life. He has a sister that he loves. He loves the New York Rangers and listens to them on TV and the radio. There's a great scene where he and Mira Sorvino are walking through the town, and he's like, "Oh, that's the lady who owns the library," and like he holds books for him in Braille for him to read. He even reads Playboy in Braille. I don't know how that works, but it's a thing in this movie. The point is, they give Virgil a character. They give Val Kilmer a character, and I appreciated that. Mira Sorvino, who was just recently in Sound of Freedom and was in movies like Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, a severely underrated movie you all should check out, she was good in the role as well. However, this was the Val Kilmer show, in my opinion anyway. All told, I thought the acting was good. I just thought that the premise was a little weird, and I felt like we were just in this movie for way too long. Like there is meat on the bones for a woman falling in love with a man who just so happens to be blind. I feel like there is a story there. Problem is, he goes through this cataract surgery, and this is based on a true story, so this actually happened. But then the surgery doesn't work, and so he basically is in this limbo of he can see sometimes, but like his eyes are going, so he's slowly reverting back to being blind. And I don't feel like that premise would entirely work today, especially, just for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of repetitive scenes too, where Val Kilmer is just like, "I'm blind, I'm supposed to be blind, why did you make me go through this?" And similar conversations happen like that more than once in this movie. And like, I literally was like head in my hands, like, dude, you literally just went through this with this woman. Like, talk about something else now. There's also subplots that come out of nowhere too, like Mira Sorvino's character maybe sort of kind of getting back with her ex-husband, and Virgil having a father who ran away from his family because of his blindness. It's brought up and is almost never referenced unless it's like the three times that it is referenced. The point is that the movie is too long and we're stuck with these people going through this drama, and it was cloying. It was really, really cloying. The acting is good. I feel like there's meat on the bones on this. However, this movie is pretty forgettable. Watch the movie Me Before You with the woman from Game of Thrones. I can't remember. I believe it's Sophie Turner. Yeah, watch that movie instead. That is far better. Anyway, let us move on now to one of the silliest thrillers that I've seen in quite some time, In Dreams. In Dreams was directed by Neil Jordan. Yes, this Neil Jordan. And the movie starred Annette Bening and Robert Downey Jr. with long hair, which was a very bizarre visual to say the least. This is based on a book that is very loosely based on a book called Doll's Eyes, written by Barry Wood. And it tells the story of a woman played by Annette Bening who just so happens to have psychic abilities. Specifically, with a very well-known serial killer played by Robert Downey Jr. At the start of the movie, Annette Bening's character's daughter is killed by the said killer, and basically she believes that she can see into his dreams and no one believes her. And it is up to her to prove that this is in fact the case. Where do I start? First of all, I want to give a little salute to Robert Downey Jr. As of this recording, he recently won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for Oppenheimer. Very well deserved indeed. He is not good in this movie, like, not really that good at all. I think, again, this is kind of similar to talking about At First Sight. I feel like there is meat on the bones here. I like a hostage movie. I like a movie about a woman trying to find her daughter and like chasing after a killer for that premise. Like it's very similar to something like, say, Taken, for example. But here's what breaks the movie for me: the psychic stuff, how she is somehow able to connect with Robert Downey Jr.'s character and that character alone. And no one believes her. And she ends up going to a psych ward and she escapes. And it's overly convoluted for no real reason. And again, I know this is based on a book and the book has these abilities, but in my research, I found that the screenplay was pretty much chopped to hell and that all manner of like what the book represented was nearly missing. The psychic abilities were there, but not pretty much nothing else. But what sent it over the top for me in just the silly side of things were a couple of things. Number one, there is a scene in which Annette Bening returns to her home and finds that Downey Jr. has been there and has left the motherload of all apples, like just a truckload of apples in her kitchen. That's the connecting thread, apples. Like just he likes apples for some reason, and he leaves like a calling card of playing the Andrews Sisters song, like "Don't go swinging in an apple tree with anyone else but me." That song, that's his calling card. Yeah, it's not particularly great. But then Annette Bening just goes crazy on these apples. And I was just sitting there like, I'm supposed to be taking this seriously right now, but this is some silly shit. It just is. And then at the very end of the movie, I'm going to spoil it, but don't watch this movie. Robert Downey Jr.'s character is kidnapped by or is not kidnapped, but is apprehended by the police. He goes to prison. And then Annette Bening's character uses her psychic abilities to torment him in his jail cell. She even reaches her hands through the mirror in the prison and smashes his head into the mirror. Freddy Krueger would look on something like that and go like, yeah, I'm a head out. This movie is horrid. It was just so just dumb and silly to watch. It did not work for me. I needed a massive palate cleanse after watching In Dreams, but thankfully one came around the corner. And well, I have no better segue, just play the Office clip.
Only cure I know for the Monday blues is Varsity Blues.
I say we go out there and we'll leave it all out on field. We got the rest of our lives to be mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods.
Varsity Blues was directed by Brian Robbins. It is the first of 4 movies from MTV Productions in '99. They were busy boys this year. And the movie starred James Van Der Beek, John Voight, Paul Walker, rest in peace, and Scott Conn. And joining me to talk about this movie in particular, I had to get someone who was a pretty much a super fan of Varsity Blues, other than Michael Scott. And
Mhm.
Michael Scott was not available, so I found the closest equivalent. My friend Phil from Phil Talks Sports. Phil, how are you?
Hey Jake, good to see you, man. I'm happy to be your second choice on this because, as you know, now that you've seen the movie, that in West Canaan, football is a way of life, and it made for a really entertaining about 2 hours in 1999.
Absolutely. And just for history's sake, Phil was actually on the channel last year to cover Rocky Balboa with me, and we had a great time doing that. So I'm glad to have him back. But like he alluded to, this movie tells the story of the West Canaan Coyotes. They're a fictional football team in Texas where like football is just a way of life in Texas. It just is what it is. But the movie follows a character named Mox, not John Moxley, but a character named Mox, played by James Van Der Beek. He is the backup quarterback on the Coyotes, but when the star quarterback, played by Paul Walker, goes down with an injury, it's up to him to lead the team under just an absolute dickhead of a coach played by John Voight and the machinations of pretty much everyone else in West Canaan. So I didn't really know what to expect with this one. I do love a good sports movie, and this movie just blew me away with how much I was invested in it because I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna turn this on and I'll like edit something in the background, and then like my eyes just kept like looking towards the screen. I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of pulling me in a little bit. And really just what it boils down to is these characters. Like Mox, I think is a great character played by James Van Der Beek. Like I immediately felt sorry for him because he lives in a football town, but he doesn't want to play football. He wants to
Right.
go to Brown and he gets in. But everyone around him is just like, you're the football guy. He's like, that's not what I want.
You really think about it when you break it down as simply as you just did. It's almost the precursor to High School Musical minus the music. It's literally a guy, and I don't think he dislikes football. He just doesn't love it the way everybody else does. I mean, the most memorable scene in this movie breaks down to this isn't the I don't want your life. This may be the biggest thing to you. To me, it's just another thing. I don't think anybody. I think he enjoys his being around his friends and his teammates more than actually playing the game. And I mean, he clearly has initiative. He comes up with this whole new offense. He kind of looks at football a different way. So he must care about it to some extent, but just that little disconnect of it not being his whole life is enough to really separate him from a lot of people in his town.
Absolutely. And there's actually a couple throwaway lines where he talks about how he likes football when it's like a pickup thing, but
Yeah.
when he's on the Coyotes, it's like a we must win no matter what. And that doesn't really help things when Bud Kilmer, played by John Voight, is entered into the picture, who is just he's just the worst. Like he is
Yeah.
like your absolute stereotype angry football coach, like Bobby Cox, like Tommy Lasorda, like that on steroids. I mean, John Voight was basically born to play this character.
Yeah, you can't be shocked that he doesn't enjoy playing football under this guy. And like every time I've seen this actor, I feel like he knows no other way. He just plays the same guy in different professions. This one just happens to be a football coach. So like it's not shocking. Like if they just had another coach, maybe he loves football as much as everybody, but he sees right through this guy, this like evil personified person, everything that's wrong with like power hungry people, whether it's in sports or not. And it makes perfect sense that he doesn't love it the way other people do. And like this guy's been coaching their song. He's like coached their parents and stuff, and they have nothing good to say about him either, other than we won when I played there. So it's really just it's all the commonalities of just like a necessary evil for success until somebody finally says like, what if this isn't necessary? What if there's another way?
Yeah, well, in terms of characters in the rest of the movie, there's a lot of characters here. I think my favorite character in the movie, period, is Billy Bob, played by Ron Lester. May he rest in peace. He passed away in 2016. But he was just a personality, and his character was more layered than I was expecting him to. When Kilmer yells at him, and then like the next scene, he's at the field like shooting his football trophies with the shotgun. I'm just
Right.
like, wow, like in another movie, he'd just be the meathead, but he's
Mm.
not that. He is a little bit, but there's more going on here than just that.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of been told his whole life, like, this is the one thing you're good at. So when Kilmer digs into him, the quarterback's injury was your fault and all this stuff. Like now the one thing I was told I was good at, I'm not good at anymore. So it literally just puts him, in disarray. Like he doesn't know what to do with the rest of his life.
You've seen this movie more than I do. I feel like with Billy Bob's character, I feel like he gets a concussion in this movie and they don't really address it. That would never fly today for many
Well,
reasons, but
it
I
definitely wouldn't, and I do think they address it, but they address it in the sense that like we just talked about how evil Kilmer is. Like he knows what a concussion is if he's been coaching for 30 years, but he doesn't care. Yeah, and he views it as like a level of toughness to fight through a concussion through a 2024 lens. We think it's dumb to just jump right back out there after a concussion. So really, it's just looking at it from dated goggles, and like I think it just comes down to like he just sees him as his right guard that protects his star quarterback. Billy Bob probably should have been playing left tackle. I think if he does, Lance doesn't get hurt because you always take your biggest lineman and put him at left tackle. That's another conversation for another time. But he just sees him as a dispendable cog in the wheel. Like if that was his son or like his quarterback, with a concussion, maybe he looks at it differently. Like you see it with the running back whose name is escaping me right now, but he, they always have to shoot his knee up and whatnot, and talks about how like he never lets him score in the red zone and everything. So it's like he just looks at these guys as cogs in the wheel, and he probably know. I imagine he's smart enough to know what a concussion is and simply doesn't care.
the biggest compliment that I can give to this movie is that it's smarter than the average bear. It could have just been a dumb football movie, but it's not that. For a movie produced by MTV, there is 1,000 times more effort put forth into this story than I could have ever predicted.
Yeah, like before you went to watch it, I think you kind of asked what to expect, and I put it like Friday Night Lights meets Major League because it's just that extra level of raunchiness that maybe like Friday Night Lights wouldn't have, and it's just fun, and like we're a couple years apart in age. This was like a coming of the time movie for me. Like everybody watched it at some point, everybody quoted it, everyone it's a 10, it's a freaking 10. Like so many people. It was just an overly quotable movie. If this movie wasn't called Varsity Blues, you could probably call it Whipped Cream Bikini the movie because
Oh
it
yeah,
was just that probably could have been the cover and it would have even more people would have went to see it. But just a very memorable, fun time back when people just made fun movies for the sake of making fun movies.
absolutely. But that whole scene with the whipped cream bikini, like I was not expecting it. My whole thing was like when it happened, I was like, "You're in Texas. It's really hot. That cream would have been melted by that point."
It's funny you say that. Little movie tip: that was actually shaving cream because just like you said, whipped cream was not going to work for what they were trying
That
to do. Actually, I had to use shaving cream for that. Fun fact.
that makes a lot of sense in
Yeah.
hindsight. But there is a lot of comedy here too, as well, to kind of cut the seriousness. There's Mox's little brother who's trying out all the different religions. I thought that was funny. There's a
Yeah.
running gag where Mox throws the ball out of bounds and hits the opposing team's mascot. Like first it was the not the wolf, but it was the the team in the first game,
Right.
that one, and then he hits the cowboy off of the horse. I'm like, that poor cowboy. I hope he didn't get hurt. He was so silly, but it got a laugh out of me. And then we got the teacher who's the stripper on the side. That would never fly today.
I got
But
to throw a flag on that part because this is such a small town. How was that kept a secret?
yeah, that's so
Yeah,
odd.
yeah.
So odd to me. Like everybody knows everybody. They'd be like, yeah, you want to know why she drives such a fancy car? Well, let's just say she's a woman of the night. Like, how is this like kept
So
under
I've
wraps?
also thought probably too deep into this. Like, let's say somebody's parent, right, visits that establishment. The only way you're going to know that about her is if you visit her place of work. So if you bring it up to somebody, it means you were there. So that's got to be the only way they've kept it a secret for that long.
It's gotta be. But I think to close things out at the end of the day, this movie, like I said, more effort put forth, and I think most of it works. I'll give this one an amazing grade. It's the first one of this whole project. Easily the best movie I've watched so far this project. It was such a fun first time watch for me. This is just I would say, even though it was received pretty mixed at the time, I feel like in certain ways it hasn't aged the best, but it also has aged pretty well in terms of like how we look at concussions and how like seriously they're treated.
Right.
Like it took me a second with the joke of Billy Bob where he's like, I scanned a cat. And I'm like, what is he
They
saying?
scanned my cat. They told me I was okay.
So it took me a minute, but like, oh, a CAT scan. Oh, okay. But that was handled particularly well. So yeah, this is a really good football movie and just a very pleasant surprise for me. I did not expect to love it as much as I did, but I did.
Yeah, if I could change even one small thing about this is I want more Scott Conn. I want more Tweeter. You know, Scott Conn's a year away from making Ready to Rumble. Like he's about to be at his like comedy peak. And like if they were gonna spin off this, it would have been Tweeter. Like if they made like a show on UPN back in the day, it would have followed Tweeter playing in college. And for those that haven't seen the movie maybe yet, Tweeter is basically a cross between Wes Welker and Charlie Sheen. That's probably the best way to describe him. And he's like my height, right? He's like 5'5", but he's like the leading receiver on this team for some reason. He gets destroyed every time he catches the ball, which I think is a running gag that not everyone's gonna notice. But like I think it really does hold the comedy and the seriousness very well. Like the his teammates, Billy Bob, back on the concussion thing, like they know what's up. They want what's best for him. And like they do, you mentioned the CAT scan joke and everything. They try to take a little bit of the heaviness out of it, but like and again, in 1999, for whatever reason, we didn't realize that concussions were bad. I don't know what that whole situation there, but like it's not the main part of the movie. It's really just it's a small anecdote to show you how evil the coach is. I think if the whole movie was about it, it'd be a little too heavy. But it's just another example. This guy doesn't care about anything but winning.
Absolutely. But Phil, thank you so much for joining me to talk about Varsity Blues. Your channel will be linked in the description. Do you have anything content-wise coming up?
Just getting back on the movie review series as well. I think Jake, me and him have a few nailed down for this year, and I have a few others with a few other guests. So there's a few sports movies that Jake doesn't cover. Maybe check out my channel, and maybe we'll cover them over there. But otherwise, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, just a bit of a preview. We're going to be talking about The Rookie at some
Yes.
point in January, which is a movie that I've loved since I first saw it. So I'm looking forward to that. But
Yep. Look
Phil,
out for that late January, early February. But otherwise, go Coyotes and have a good time, guys.
yeah, thank you, Phil. Thank you so much for joining me. But let's close out this episode of the 99 Project with some kind of weird ass Terminator alien hybrid. It's Virus. Virus was directed by John Bruno, a legendary VFX man working a lot with James Cameron. More on that in a minute. And the movie starred Jamie Lee Curtis, Cliff Curtis, and Donald Sutherland. It tells the story of a crew of, of, of a crew in the middle of the ocean. They receive a distress signal from a Russian spy ship that's they're basically stuck in the water with nowhere to go. And so they go to help save the ship and, well, in Donald Sutherland's mind, get a whole lot of money off the salvage. But there's something wrong with the ship, and, well, at the sea, no one can hear you scream. If you picked up on that quote, that was a derivative of the famous tagline from the Alien movie poster, "In space, no one can hear you scream." That's because Virus is a derivative of several much better movies. Funny enough, John Bruno, being one of the main VFX guys for James Cameron, worked with him on movies like T2, and this movie was produced by Gail Ann Hurd. So yeah, there was a lot of James Cameron influence on this movie, but that was not a good thing. I did want to like this movie. The VFX are genuinely very impressive, especially like at certain points where they definitely where some points where the horror elements come in. I thought it was very well handled, but it just reminded me of movies I would have much rather have been watching, like a crew basically going and answering a distress signal only to find that the distress signal comes attached with something pretty deadly. Alien. Robots coming off to kill humanity. The Terminator. It also doesn't help things that the action really doesn't get started until about 45 minutes into the movie, where you see this whole thing with Donald Sutherland being like, "We're in the money," and Jamie Lee Curtis being like, "No, we're not. Like, we just gotta like get these people out of here." And then everything starts, and it just was so boring. And not until the action starts, you're like, all right, we're getting somewhere. But for a movie that is 90 minutes long, the pacing was all over the board. I do admire this movie for having practical effects and looking like it took place mostly on location. I will give it that. However, it really hurts that the movie has this many people, and it just feels very much like James Cameron would have directed this a whole lot better if he probably wasn't spending like his Titanic money by that point diving to the deep of the ocean. This movie's pretty forgettable. Not bad, but just kind of there and just kind of derivative. But what did you all think of any of these movies? Let me know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. And next week, among other things, I'll be covering yet another made-for-TV Martin Luther King Jr. movie and a movie from Sidney Lumet. So stay tuned for all of that. But my name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.